Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Welcome to Zestology and my review of the year. I'm Tony. I'm walking around West London recording this out and about at the moment, and I've been mulling an extraordinary year. And actually, as luck would have it, today is my first wedding anniversary as well. So I've sort of I really have been reflecting over the year that we've had, and I was thinking about sort of all the places that me and my wife, my 1 year wife now, Faith, we have travelled around, mostly in the UK, and also reflecting on the fact that we spent about 5 months in lockdown at the beginning of the year. It really has been extraordinary, hasn't it? I think the pandemic has magnified all the little sort of anxieties, stresses and worries that we often have in our day-to-day life, and we sort of push to the back of our minds. It's brought it right to the forefront, and I think for many of us who have these little sort of niggles and anxieties, it's made them a bit worse, hasn't it? So I think we need the kind of thing that we've talked about in Zestology more than ever. And one of the things I've noticed is, and this is totally relevant as much now as when the pandemic was right at its height and we were all in lockdown, is that when you spend too much time scrolling on social media and reading everything that's going on. By the way, I'm walking past a building site, so I hope you can't hear it too much. I hope it's not too noisy. When you're constantly scrolling on social media and you're reading the news 24/7, it is just not that good for your brain. And this is a journalist talking to you on that one as well. It's just not good for your brain, is it? So at the start of the year, January the 4th, I spoke to Tim Kendall from The Social Network, one of the stars of The Social Network, who puts a lot of thought into how to help us use tech effectively. And so I'm going to start my review of the year with Tim Kendall. Here he is.
The tried and true number one best practice is, if I want to stop eating refined sugar, the best way to do that is to get it out of my house or get it out of my apartment. Because what that does, and they call it, there's a term in psychology called pre-commitment or behavior change. It's called pre-commitment. I pre-commit to not eating sugar by getting it out of my house so that tonight it's not there. And the really tricky thing about the phone is that there aren't mechanisms that allow me to pre-commit, right? Even Apple's product allows me to override whatever rules I put in place. And so that's sort of equivalent to saying, all right, I'm going to get sugar out of my house, but if I snap my fingers, it'll come back. And that is not a recipe for behavior change. And what I like about the kitchen safe a lot is that it mimics that sugar thing, which is, okay, I'm going to pre-commit to not be on this phone for 4 hours. I put it in the kitchen safe, I put the top on, I turn the timer to 4 hours, I pop the little button to engage it, and I can't touch my phone for 4 hours no matter what.
I've got a 2-year-old, and I just wonder, it's quite interesting because a lot of my friends have got older children, and they all talk to me about the problems that they have with screen time and trying to get them to escape the screens at a certain point, and how they're all kind of pushing the boundaries. And it's such a young area, this whole area of technology and screens, that kind of universally established boundaries haven't really been brought in. And I just wonder if in 5 or 10 years' time, we will look back on now and say, wow, we really weren't protecting ourselves at all. And at least now we're doing this, that, and the other to kind of.
Yeah, it's going to be like secondhand smoke. We discovered in the last 20 years, like, oh shit, that secondhand smoke really makes people sick.
Yeah.
I think we will absolutely have that. I mean, you're starting to see the research now among, the science around the impact of overuse of devices on kids' brains. And they've shown thinning of the prefrontal cortex associated with phone overuse among teenagers and children. By the way, the prefrontal cortex is really the part of the brain that distinguishes us from animals. It allows us to exercise judgment. Overuse also corresponds with the erosion of gray matter around the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's kind of our animal brain that manages impulses. So there's no question that the effects around resulting from overuse are serious, and they're starting to get causally documented.
That was Tim Kendall on Zestology, and who knows what 2022 holds in terms of the pandemic and COVID and challenging times. But I do think the sort of principles that he was talking about hold firm and are more important than ever. And I'm sure you'll agree, actually, if you're a Zestology listener, you're sort of on board with that sort of thing. Putting the phone down every once in a while. As I was talking about last week on my podcast, I've got these screen-free Sundays that we're doing. It's great in my family. It's hard, but it's great. And I think that sort of thing does help to just lower those anxiety levels and those cortisol levels a little bit. Right, now then, let's move on to February. And I spoke to David Milburn, an air quality expert who runs a company called HypoAir. And we looked at this question: is your home making you sick?
Many of us this year have been homebound more due to, COVID lockdowns. You do have more control of your space in a way, but we're also realizing that the indoor air is much worse in many cases than the outdoor air. And we tend to seal up our homes so tightly that if you introduce something that has a source of contaminant, now you're trapping that contaminant in your air and you're absorbing that into your body just through your normal breathing.
So what might those contaminants be? Because obviously you and I live in very different climates. You're in Southern California at the moment,
Sure.
But I'm guessing for you it might be aircon, and for us it might be heaters or something like that.
I mean, there's so many sources that, with air quality, we break it up into a few categories. Here in Southern California, one thing that might be an extreme example is a wildfire. We've had a lot of those this year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And, when you have something that's burning, you've got particulate pollution. So these are kind of like physical pieces of something.
Yeah.
And we're most concerned with the smallest size. So you might hear the term PM 2.5. That's referring to the diameter of the particulate. So 2.5 microns and smaller. Those are going to pass right through a lot of filters, a lot of your natural human defenses. Going to travel deep into your lungs. And so the particulates from a wildfire can go right through your HVAC and right into your lungs and cause lots of respiratory, irritation and other types of complications. And then with the wildfire, you also are producing chemicals. So these would be chemical compounds of various kinds that are, odors, things that have been burnt. And those chemicals, especially in higher concentrations, can be a problem.
I have these kind of seasonal allergies, except they come all year round, and it's very much affected by things like diet, but also dust. I have found when I, switch on one of your air purifiers overnight, in fact, the very first night that I left it on overnight, it felt like being asleep in a kind of a cool forest with a fresh breeze. I just slept so much. My nose was so much clearer, and I felt like I was breathing so much deeper and clearer. So let's kind of drill into it a bit. What is the product that I've been using? It's the Air Angel, isn't it? And it's very small and unassuming, but it's very, very good.
Yeah, it's an upgraded version of a product we've had for a little while, and that features 2 of our proprietary technologies. And one of the things that we believe with air quality is that, there's no silver bullet. So you need different tools for different problems. And, a unit like that is very versatile, and it can cover up to about 300 square feet of cars, rooms, lots of situations like that. But we like to tackle things on an individual basis. Sometimes you need physical filters, sometimes you don't. In your case, you're able to achieve the results, your health goals that you need with almost no maintenance. And with a unit that you can move between, your posh shed and your home, and so that's like an ideal fit for you. And we have different units of different sizes, as well as incorporate various types of technologies to attack different situations.
Well, this is the Zestology review of the year, recording it out and about in West London. And since I've switched back to recording these podcasts out and about, I haven't looked back. It's just so nice to be getting a bit of fresh air recording the podcast rather than sitting in front of a microphone. Not that I don't enjoy doing that occasionally, but why not combine two things that sort of make me feel good? And definitely, one of the things we look at all the time is the combination of movement and energy, and how movement creates energy, and vice versa. Spoke to Manish Sethi in March. He is one of my favourite podcast guests. He's been on the podcast a few times, and we talked about wearable tech to help fight bad habits.
Over the last year, we launched our new product, Pavlok 3, and I'm happy to say for the first time, it's beautiful rather than like the old styles, which were just not so pretty. So that was big. And then a second thing that's been big for us is we created a new community membership where people are challenged to do good habits. And so our team has been growing, our products have been growing. The quantity of success stories we get is massively shifted. I would do experiments and try to find hacks, both for, mental and productivity hacks, as well as loopholes in the system in order to get free plane tickets or be able to become, hack fame, things like that. So I think in a lot of ways, it sounds, it's very representative of my ADHD, ENTP personality, this visionary type, where I like to do lots of stuff. And only recently have I realized that you can kind of put things together and create systems that enable you to actually complete and execute multiple different things at the same time under the same umbrella.
Yeah. Do you still have lots of other stuff going on as well as Pavlok, or you just really focus on one thing now?
Pavlok is everything to me. But that said, Pavlok is an umbrella. So Pavlok as a wake-up device is different than Pavlok as our new hardware products we're releasing, which are power accessories and for charging. And Pavlok as a behavior change system involves our new social aspect of having groups of people doing a challenge together, so essentially Pavlok is kind of the brand between everything I do, and I don't think I'll ever stop doing it. But the umbrella of Pavlok lets me do everything I want under the guise of the same brand.
Well, staying in March, I spoke to Manish Sethi, and I also spoke to one of my favourite podcast guests of the year, and someone whose book I've absolutely loved, Nadine Artemis. And by the way, you've got to seek out her stuff. She's got her own sort of range of products, but her books are just so good. She's excellent in the natural health world, and we spoke about light, energy, and inspiration. And she is one of those guests that I did feel energized after having spoken to her for sort of half an hour or 40 minutes or so. I hope this will serve as a little reminder for you. And if you want to go back and listen to Nadine again, it's episode 314.
SPF is really a term that can only be used for a synthetic ingredient because of the whole regulation and testing to make something labeled as an SPF. So on one, so jojoba or olive oil or coconut oil have what we would think of as sort of a sun protective quality. I think of it more as a sun harmonizing quality. Pretty much if using olive oil, for example, or jojoba will improve your time in the sun, will extend it. That's going to vary, right? If you have Mediterranean skin or Irish skin or whatever. So it's going to vary. So there's this sun harmonizing factor. And then with oils that have, then there's oils that have other protective qualities and for the sun, like fresh pressed raspberry seed oil has an equivalent of an SPF 25. But again, we can't totally correlate because that's just for synthetics. But what the raspberry seed oil seems to do is it sort of scatters the rays. And so again, you can't probably put on raspberry seed oil and then sit out in the sun for 6 hours, or like what you would do with a normal 25 SPF. And then you've got the plants that are rich in pigments, like calendula and sea buckthorn, and those add to a sun protective quality. And then you've got essential oils, which can protect in a different way. They would keep the cells. They keep the cells staying normal, because often when the cells are getting disorganized and abnormal, they're kind of going down another pathway. And so the essential oils are able to heal the skin, able to, work with, to generate cell activity that's stimulating and healing. So they're there for or they can help to cool and calm a sunburn. So we've got just so many uses out of the botanicals for sun quality that we don't have to be slathering on an SPF. But the thing is, besides the SPF being chemicals and, disrupting hormones and the endocrine system and a whole bunch of stuff, one of the issues that I think a big issue with SPF, besides the chemicals, is that when we slather on the SPF, we are then receiving the sun's rays divided from each other. So UVA and UVB, which are ultraviolet partners, are separated. So we no longer get UVB, and we're only, because it filters it out, and we're just getting the UVA, which on its own is actually damaging more to skin. And you're getting no vitamin D because the UVB ray is the vitamin D generating ray.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly my ventures with finding natural sunscreens involves a lot of sun creams which make me look like I've got a face like a clown. So this is quite an appealing idea.
Well, yes. Now, so that's zinc. And we also have Everybody Loves the Sunshine, which is this beautiful oil with the pigment, everything I've just mentioned and about 20 other beautiful ingredients. And then we've got Everybody Loves the Sunshine with zinc. So we use a non-nanoized, non-coated zinc, which is what hopefully you'll see when you're looking for something more natural. And zinc works because it deflects the rays. So you're literally having those rays bounce off. But that's more like a sunblock than an SPF.
So that was episode 314, if you want to listen to Nadine Artemis again. And let's fast forward to April then, and episode 319. And Ryan Carter is a good friend of mine. And since I became friends with Ryan, he's amassed this incredible Instagram following. He's got about 750,000 followers on Instagram, all following his Live Vitae healthy living tips. And we spoke about personalised nutrition and optimised health. And it was just sort of coming out of lockdown when Ryan and I spoke. And I think to think about your nutrition and your health when you've been sort of literally locked down and not able to do the sort of exercise that you'd normally do, or see the people that you normally see, or play your five-a-side football or whatever it might be, was more important than ever. And oh God, I hope that doesn't all happen again. But here was Ryan Carter on Zestology. When someone is looking for a practitioner, how should they find someone who does that? Because that's, I suppose, the difference between working with someone more conventional and working with someone with a bit more of a kind of a functional, bit more of a kind of biohacking background, emphasizing the natural and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage my clients, and actually anyone who's just listening to this, to take power. Like, it's a big decision that you're embarking on. You're giving someone the trust, you're being honest with them, you're having an open relationship with them, and you are having the faith that they're going to actually be the one person to put you on the path of healing and health optimization or prevention, whatever outlook you want to look on it. So take that power and treat it as an interview. So get really deep with like what you really want to achieve. What are the potential obstacles as well? So understand your self limitations as well, and propose that onto the practitioner in question and treat it as an interview. Is this person equipped to be able to deal with you? Do they have the understanding and empathy as well? Or are they just literally after your money and think they need to do all these testings and throw supplements at you without actually having a real understanding of the complexity of your personalized history and issues presented?
I know that a lot of people, and you as well, you offer these discovery calls. And it's quite interesting because I had a discovery call with someone a little while back, and I'm looking at someone who works specifically in certain areas that are kind of quite niche. And despite it being a discovery call, and this guy's very well qualified as well, I won't mention his name, but he's very well qualified. And we talked, he asked me a couple of things. We talked for about 30 seconds, and I talked for about 30 seconds. And then he talked for about 20 minutes, and I just kind of listened to him. And it was quite frustrating, actually, because not that I like the sound of my own voice, but I kind of wanted to get across what I wanted to work on. And instead, he was just kind of dazzling me with all his knowledge. And at the end of the 20 minutes, I felt rather deflated because I thought he clearly knows a lot, but also he's clearly not willing to actually listen, which was a real disappointment. I suppose that's a skill that is, really important in your world.
Yeah, I think the use of discovery calls, obviously complimentary discovery calls, is a great aid to a good sounding board for the person. So obviously you can propose, like I said previously, an interview. You can propose them questions, how they'll handle your case, if they've had any history dealing with perhaps symptoms that you're expressing. And you'll just get a vibe basically of them. Yeah. Like you said, that the guy likes to talk. The person likes the sound of his own voice and wasn't actually listening to you or actually understanding how he can help you or what's troubling you and every other factor contributing to your health. Just understand these are like areas where you can question, pick up some red flags perhaps. And I like it. It's an opportunity. It's not just the client proposing questions to me, for example, but it's also I can suss out if the client is actually approachable to some of my recommendations or methodologies that I perhaps use. And if there is if there's good rapport there, like I don't personally want to be working with someone who's going to be quite simply a pain in the ass, basically.
There you go, Ryan Carter at Live Vitae on Instagram, and episode 319 if you'd like to listen to the whole thing. And the very next episode was me on my own talking about my new book. So one of the great benefits of having a year where you are forced to work in the garden shed for a few months is that I was able to write my fourth book. My first three have been published in 12 languages, so I suppose there was quite a lot to live up to. And it's a hell of a process writing a book, but I was very lucky to find Lindsay Newton, who is an unbelievable editor and who worked me extremely hard. The writer's heart slightly sinks when you get back a first draft and you think, do you know what, this is 3 weeks of work just to go through her changes and her suggested edits. Anyway, in April, I did a podcast and I just looked at some of the aspects of the book that I've covered. When life is a bit meh, you need energy. And life was a bit meh back in April, actually. We were locked down, so I sort of wanted to rush it out before the end of lockdown, actually. But if you haven't read the book, or if you have, and you want a few reminders, this is what I spoke about in that podcast, When Life is a Bit Meh. So what is this book all about? Well, it is all about boosting your energy with biohacking and NLP. We start off by soaking up the energizing power of the natural world, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on that chapter and tell you a little bit more about that in a sec. We look at exercise, the new radical workouts which boost our mood, circulation, brain and body. And I'm just going to give you a kind of brief overview of what I've talked about because I wanted this to be a kind of behind the scenes look at my new book. Then the temperature plummets as we increase the happy chemicals in our brain with the cold, all the different ways in which cold can help you. Then we switch on our brain. We explore radical ways to harness our brainwaves, use neurofeedback, access deeper states, unleash our potential. We look at fuel, and one of the things that I'm really interested in is, obviously, you know this from listening to the podcast, but intermittent fasting. And I wanted to bring that to a much wider audience. So we looked at fuel timings, fuel rules, and fuel boosters, which is supplements. All my favorite energizing supplements are in there. We then devote a whole section to that most noble of causes, which is managing our hangovers in alcohol, responsibly, obviously. If you want more energy, we need to tackle our meh on the home front. So we look at a kind of non-toxic, low EMF, supernatural, clutter-free home. Then we look at sleep. You can't have energy without rest. We learn how to increase melatonin and REM sleep, avoid blue light in the evening, get a longer, deeper rest, and so on. And once you've explored hundreds of methods in this book, then the magic happens in the metrics chapter. That is where I bring together everything I've learned in order to ensure I've chosen the methods that work best. I collect stats on HRV, sleep, diet, health, even DNA to create a unique energy template which will serve us well into the future. We look at getting a little bit less domesticated in the book, reconnecting with our wild, natural side without having to go camping in the woods for 5 days. So we start by looking at forest bathing, and I wanted to read you a little bit about what I wrote on forest bathing, give you a little flavour for the book. So this is forest bathing. Everything that makes life worth living comes through the senses. As I write this, I'm listening to Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 5 in C-sharp minor. The great man first made his name as a conductor and as he matured, then became the great composer. Much of his creative work was written in the woods in southern Austria at a tiny little composing cottage. His routine was extremely strict. He would wake early and immediately take off to his stone hut in the forest. This was a tiny little dwelling under a canopy of trees. His mornings would consist of woodland solitude. The dappled sunlight would filter through the open door as he ate his modest breakfast alone on a bench. After his morning's music making was over, he would take multiple dips in the local lake. Then he would dry off in the sun and dip in once again. There would be a light lunch, and then long, invigorating walks in the afternoon. You might say Mahler used forest bathing for inspiration. This is now a very in term for getting outside, but has been acknowledged for many years and by many cultures for its rejuvenating power. The Japanese call it Shinrin-yoku. This translates as spending time in a forest and soaking up the sights, sounds and smells of the great outdoors to revive body and soul. That's all. Just doing this is proven to lift your mood. Forest bathing does admittedly sound a bit pretentious, but here's the thing, it doesn't actually have to be done in a forest. Consider the word forest to be a metaphor. Go anywhere that isn't indoors. Soak up the sights, sounds and smells of nature in your local park. Hug a tree on your street. Bathe in the back garden. The science shows you'll feel less meh. Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that it is brought to you by P3OM. What is that? Well, it is very relevant at this time of year. Winter, aka sick season. Well, it is upon us, isn't it? We all know this is the time of year to take extra care to protect ourselves from germs and bacteria. And that is why I'm really excited about P3OM, because you can do everything. Wash your hands, sanitize, keep your hands away from your face, whatever it might be, but you still get sick. P3OM is a patented probiotic that might be the most effective probiotic ever developed. And P3OM fights bacteria and strengthens immunity. It is basically a germ-fighting superhero. I'm particularly excited about this because I do believe that even when I do get a bug, my sort of immunity is better than it was. And I really think that P3OM is part of that. There's a video, if you go to p3om.com/Zestology, of the probiotic literally breaking down a piece of steak, which is quite the video. And it shows you how it all works. I mean, it's amazing. There's a lump of steak and it sort of dissolves because of P3OM. After I saw that, I was all in, and you may well be as well. p3om.com/Zestology. If you use the coupon code Zestology10, you will get 10% off. And in fact, on that page, p3om.com/Zestology, you can get up to 38% off if you buy more than one bottle. but you might just want to buy it and get one. So it's P3OM/Zestology. You get a 10% discount with coupon code Zestology10, and that code works all over the world if you're in the UK or in the US as well. And, enjoy it. I really do think this winter we want to make sure our immunity is tip-top, and P3OM is the way to do it. Now, back to the show. From April to May, and from Ryan Carter to someone who's a bit of a hero of mine, actually, Cal Newport has written deep work which has influenced my work a lot. I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit more prone to distraction and I have to work on it harder than some people, but Cal Newport's work has influenced me a lot, and I was very excited to score an interview with him. So here is Cal Newport. He was on in May, and he talked about, rescuing ourselves from email and WhatsApp hell.
It's very stressful. I would try to really consolidate my news consumption. Like, this is it. I'll check in on what's going on. I'll try to end on a positive note, like what's a good development, what's something that's happening good. But you would get just these little hits. And you're right, the radio, or the thing that would keep getting me is my iPhone. I would be trying to swipe over. And I guess if you swipe too far, it shows you Apple News. Oh. And that's what would always get me. I was like, I don't need to know about this. You swipe too far, and it's like, coronavirus outbreaks everywhere. And you hit that, it's physical. Like that little punch in the gut, you really feel it, which gives us this broader point, which is technologies are not these neutral tools like a hammer that some are better than others. They can be deeply enmeshed into our emotional, subjective experience. So it's something to really take carefully.
Yeah. Now, I find this quite kind of consoling that you are one of the world's, you are the world's go-to authority on issues of kind of focus and distraction and so forth. If you're struggling with it, then I feel better about myself. So you do struggle as well, do you?
Well, I found the pandemic to be struggling. I mean, I think it helped that I don't use social media. I think it helps that I'm relatively low news consumption. I actually use a paper newspaper, that I read in the morning. So if even someone, I turn it around. If even someone like me found that I was seeing enough that was making me really upset, I extrapolated that to think, man, this must be what a lot of people's life is like, even in much more normaler times. If you were constantly plugged into this flow of hyper arousing information that's been algorithmically optimized, I feel like I got a taste of what a lot of people really experience in terms of their encounter with information throughout the day.
And then, of course, you mentioned how there is a generation that has grown up with, I can't remember the word used, was it hyper connectivity?
Yeah, or hyper communicativity, like constant communication. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that you've got a family, and I've got a 2-year-old, and we've talked quite a bit about healthy ways to use technology around him and bring him up around technology. I wonder how you put all this into practice with your family.
Well, I think demonstration is critical. What they see is something they're going to internalize. So if they see their parents always on their phone, it's going to internalize what their relationship with technology might be, which is why I'm a big preacher of what I call the phone foyer method, where, your phone is by the front door. In the foyer, it's where you plug it in. If you need to look something up, you go to your phone. If you're expecting a call, you turn the ringer on. It's not with you by default in the house. Like that is something I think is a big deal because young people see it. I also think we're going to see a shift. I mean, this is just a prediction, but I think within about 5 years or so, we're going to see a cultural shift in which it's going to be deemed increasingly inappropriate for, let's say, a young adolescent to have access to a smartphone. That seeing a 15-year-old with a smartphone will be how seeing perhaps a 15-year-old with a cigarette suddenly became something that was really socially inappropriate at some point during whenever this was in the 1960s or 1970s. I think we'll probably see something like that happen with adolescents. So by the time our kids are of that age, we probably will have a lot less work to do because we're not unlucky enough to be the first generation to have kids to have access to this. We'll be able to learn from what came before. So I think that's important as well. If I had a 15-year-old kid right now, they would not have a smartphone. I just think both the research, but also just the anecdotal self-reporting of young people, it is a really large sort of negative impact in their lives.
From May to June, and somebody who I met for the first time in 2021, but I've got a feeling it's going to be a friend long into the future because of her infectious enthusiasm and love for all things biohacking and age hacking. In fact, her website and blog is called Hack Your Age, Zora the Explorer, as she's known, is extremely knowledgeable, great fun. I've learnt a lot from her, and I was very excited to make her acquaintance. And she's been on my podcast a couple of times this year, and I've got a feeling there'll be more in 2022 as well. She's excellent, her work. I highly recommend it. You must check out Hack Your Age. And here she was helping us to hack our age on Zestology.
I'm 50. And so my channel is all about helping women over 50, live the better life with more energy. Now, the hacks, it's so funny because there's so many hacks out there and you can do so many things. And I love explaining it this way. And I stole this from Natalie Needham, who's a fantastic podcaster as well, and a clinical nutritionist and biohacker. And she says, and I love it, you can't fix the plumbing in a house that's on fire. If somebody comes to you and says, let's just do this, well, let's put out the fire, or at least try to do it at the same time, because technically, yeah, you could try to fix the plumbing, but why? The house is freaking on fire. So when we look at our bodies like that and full of inflammation and glycation and oxidation and, just kind of falling apart, like throwing some supplements at it, it's not going to do a whole lot, maybe a little bit, but why not put out the fire? And that's where if you want energy, let's stop doing these things that are robbing us of energy in the first place, right? That's the fire, and this could be, the crap food diet that you're on, or it could be hanging around negative people. It could be the toxic mold. It could be you're in a bad relationship or in a bad job, shift work. I mean, you're not getting enough sleep. So many things that are robbing us of energy. So let's just, get that out of our lives. Let's take the fire out. And then you build this foundation. I was explaining like a pyramid, the very foundation of the pyramid would be those factors that we all know about, it's like the simple, the low hanging fruit hacks in terms of changing your diet for whatever that may be that works for you, moving in a way that works for you, and getting the necessary exercise, sleep and stress management, and your community, your friendships, your connections. I mean, these are super important, your purpose in life. Get that foundation. The middle of the pyramid are the supplements and the PRP and the therapies and acupuncture, all this, whatever hacks you want to have. And then the very top of the pyramid is like those, the ultimate biohacks that go a little bit more advanced. So that middle part and the top of the pyramid are just really not going to work, or they move the needle a little bit if you don't have that foundation. So really like to emphasize that foundation is super important for getting your energy back. So it's cleaning up the house, or like put the house on out of fire, and then you could start building on top of it. And I would say if there was just one thing really for the energy, I really go back to your purpose in your life, who you are, knowing who you are, and the connections that you have.
Well, that was episode 329, if you want to listen to that one in full. And on to episode 333, and the most listened to podcast guest ever on Zestology. He was back, John Gray, episode 333, on relationships, lockdown, and the one supplement he takes wherever and whenever he sees a wrinkle, which was enjoyable as well. As much as I love John, it is hard to get a word in edgeways, but then I always feel so good after chatting to him, so who cares? I'll just sort of sit back and listen to it a little bit. But John Gray was on the podcast again, and here he is. I know that you are keen on a little bit of biohacking as well. What do you take? Do you take any testosterone kind of boosters? I know there's one supplement that you love, which I wanted to ask you about. I can't remember the name, but what's it called?
Oh, Tongkat Ali. It's 20 years since I took Tongkat Ali.
Oh, okay.
but no, I love it for men. I have an erection every day, and I'd be having an erection all day if I took Tongkat Ali.
I think I might have taken Tongkat Ali before. I think
if you don't get a result from Tongkat Ali, you need to just take more. It's one of these herbs. It's so powerful.
What's this Serrapeptase all about? Is that? I mean, I know that's not to testosterone, but what's that all about?
Serrapeptase is about taking pain out of your body. One of the biggest decreasers of testosterone in men and estrogen in women is pain. Pain is a certain level of cortisol. All right. So if you're in pain, your body's always going to be hormonally out of balance. It's tough. And so you got pain suppressors, which are the worst things to do. You've got, of course, the drugs are really bad, but the most common one, which I'd say is the worst drug on the planet because it's so widely used, is Tylenol. You have a different word for it, paracetamol.
Yeah.
Paracetamol is the second biggest selling drug in the world.
Okay.
And it inhibits your antioxidant production in your body. There's a hormone called glutathione.
Yeah.
So it's a molecule, it's your body's super antioxidant. Do you take MSM?
No,
you know what it is?
No.
Oh, sulfur. Sulfur.
I have heard of it, but tell me.
Oh, sulfur is, if I was to take one supplement, you should see my house. I mean, because I sell supplements as well. I got a health food store. Online at marsvenus.com, which is good for people to know, is to get, if you want educated advice on any supplement, go to my website. You can't buy from my website in England, but you can know what's good for you to get. But MSM, if I couldn't do anything, I would take MSM. MSM is sulfur. It's the building block of the body. And the other super supplement we're just touching on was Serrapeptase. And a lot of people don't know about Serrapeptase, but you can get it. It's been around for the last decade. It's a massive discovery. You know how you can take enzymes to improve your digestion. Well, Serrapeptase is an enzyme that doesn't digest your food. It digests fibrin. And whenever you have chronic pain, you have what's chronic inflammation. The reason it stays in your body is fibrin develops around it. It's every time you have pain in your body, there's an infection and there's inflammation, and the body hasn't figured out how to end the infection. So the body becomes inflamed, and then fibrin builds up around it to keep that infection from spreading in your body, even after the infection's finished. So that's why you get chronic pain. Pain is normal and natural. You should feel pain if some injury happens. Pain connects the brain to it, and then it should go away very quickly. When it doesn't, when you have chronic pain, arthritic pain, chronic pain anywhere in your body, even these calcium deposits that start in the body, all of these stuck areas in your body have fibrin, and Serrapeptase will melt fibrin. Literally, it melts it away, just like it melts your meat down. You need enzymes to melt it all down.
Look into it.
Well, Serrapeptase is made. They found it from silkworms.
I saw that on your site. Yeah, that's amazing.
It melts the cocoon. It gets released and melts the cocoon. So they take some of that, then they mass produce it in these factories. So Serrapeptase, an amazing enzyme, never a side effect. The only side effect, I've been promoting it for 10 years, something like that. And the only side effect I heard was a guy who had chronic inflammation, arthritic pain all the time. And he was taking all these painkillers for it. And I'm really against painkillers if you can find another way, because anytime you're taking a painkiller, you're suppressing glutathione. Yeah. If you suppress glutathione, you don't have antioxidants in your body. Your brain degenerates. You get old. You get sick. All that crazy stuff. So you don't want to live in pain, because if you're living in pain, you're constantly producing cortisol. And for men, that's lowering your testosterone. And for women, that's lowering your estrogen. That's what pain does. You want to get out of pain. Pleasure is the place to be. So Serrapeptase, well, the only side effect of Serrapeptase was one guy, he started taking it with my advice, and all his pain went away in a couple of weeks. Okay, terrible pain, was taking all these drug pains, and then he started getting diarrhea. So he goes to a doctor who doesn't know anything about supplements and says, "Well, all my pain is gone, but now I get diarrhea taking this substance." And the doctor says, "Well, you shouldn't take that substance. You should take your pain pills." And so the guy calls me up. I said, "Forget it. Just cut your dose."
This is my Zestology review of the year, and one of the most extraordinary years, let's be honest. And I spoke to Dr. Nicola Conlon on Zestology about a supplement that people are raving about. NAD pops up again and again in the biohacking world, so I thought it was only right that I investigate a little bit further. And we'd already interviewed Dr. David Sinclair on Zestology, and he talked about NAD. And it was time to go deep with Dr. Nicola Conlon.
Yeah, so NAD is one of these kind of big breakthroughs in the field of aging. And it's basically a natural molecule that's found in every single cell of your body. And it performs some really, really important biological functions. And the two that it's most well known for are, firstly, energy production. So if you remember back to biology, looking at the production of ATP for your muscles and the Krebs cycle and things like that, NAD is absolutely critical for those reactions to happen. So if you didn't have NAD in your cells couldn't generate energy. You would literally be dead in 30 seconds. So it's very important. The other side, which is where it kind of links a little bit more to longevity, is that NAD acts as like a sensor in the cell. And it basically acts as a signal to switch things on and off. And the things that it's really involved in switching on and off are mechanisms to do with cellular maintenance and cellular repair. So to basically keep the cell in good health and fully functioning. And the issue that has been found is that when we're young, we have really high levels of NAD, but as we go throughout our life, it just goes down, down, down until you're elderly and you really don't have very much NAD left in your cells at all. And given the important roles that NAD does, this is kind of a big issue, not to have enough NAD, because it means, first of all, your energy just drops through the floor. And secondly, your cells aren't getting those vital maintenance and repair processes switched on. So they become damaged, the damage accumulates, and ultimately this manifests as the sort of signs and symptoms that we associate with aging.
And is NAD related to niacinamide? Is that the same thing?
So niacinamide is what we would call a precursor to NAD. So NAD is actually quite a large molecule. So it tends to have to be made within the cells where it's needed. So the way the cells do this is they kind of ship in the sort of building blocks, niacinamide is one of them, and then they assemble it into the larger NAD molecule in the cell.
Right. So NAD, I mean, obviously this podcast is about energy. So
Yep.
NAD can help us with longevity and aging, but also can help us with energy in the short term as well.
Yes, absolutely. So you find in a lot of like metabolic diseases, things that are associated with lack of energy, they actually have chronically low NAD levels. So it's not just older people that tend to have low NAD. It's also, you know, people with metabolic diseases like diabetes, obesity, things like that. And you find that their NAD levels are, when you measure them, it looks like at a cellular age that they have the levels of older people.
Yeah.
And this really messes with their energy.
Okay, into September, and one of the most extraordinary interviews I've done in a long time with Laura Coe. Laura first came on this podcast back in 2015, 2016, and she'd been a high-flying entrepreneur. Then she'd sort of sold up for millions and millions and developed this personal development business, and then gone and done something completely different again. And we talked about authentic connection, and then things took a strange turn as she did a reading on me. And having known Laura for a long time, it was just an extraordinary moment. I had to edit out some of the silence because they were so long that that's not great podcast listening, is it? Listening to hours and hours of silence. But have a listen to this and see what you make of it. And if you want to listen to the full podcast, it's episode 349.
I'll only say Tony when I'm saying it out loud because we use the name you go by, but in my head in the silence I use the full name.
Okay, right? Cool.
Ready?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And so we open ourselves to the light. And with this light, we open ourselves to our soul's purpose. And with this light, we open ourselves to be guided towards our highest good and the highest good of those we love. So Tony is given the truth to best serve him on his healing journey into the love and acceptance that is most beneficial for him in this moment. And with this light and guidance, we unlock the energy field of Tony to receive the record of his soul. All right. So what did you want to ask about?
Well, I guess I could ask about my sort of slight change of life direction. As probably most listeners know, I was working in TV until fairly recently, and now I'm focusing full time on my writing and podcasting, and that's really exciting. But there's this sort of dilemma of whether to throw the kitchen sink at it and invest more in terms of, obviously I can grow a lot quicker if I can do that, but it's a bit riskier, or not invest, look after the family with the money I'd save and grow it myself. So is that the sort of question that is a good question to ask?
Sure. It would just be what it's for your highest good. Because there's no right or wrong path in our life. It's just what is for our highest good in any moment. So I could ask it that way, if that makes sense for you.
Sure. Yeah.
So to invest into your company, or to kind of keep the savings for your family, and is that the main point?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my process just takes me about 5-10 seconds to ground the question, and I'll share what I can.
Don't worry. I think that's going to be excellent podcast silence. Everyone's.
All right. So I'm going to do this in both ways. I'm going to tell you what I get when I think about you investing fully into this business, and how the benefits of that for you, or the drawbacks. And then we'll look at like what it means to keep it for the family and the more maybe secure path.
Okay.
So it's like when I ask, okay, for your highest good, if you were to invest into this business, the records come through in metaphor a lot of times. So you get these sort of images. I think there's a certain amount of fear that comes with this, right? So it feels like you have this satchel of money, and it's like in a big bag, and it's like I'm taking a bicycle. It's the weirdest image, and I'm driving it off the side of a cliff, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it feels like very quickly this bicycle. I'm going to check why it's a bicycle, but it's almost like you jump off this cliff, but then you start to fly, right? So even though there's this initial fear of cliff diving, you immediately start to go up and up and up, and you're really excited about it. I feel it's almost like the wind is underneath the bike and is allowing you to really move forward in a way that's really beautiful. And so I see the bike, and you're going up into these clouds, and you're still holding this bag of money.
Yeah.
It feels like the return for you is not in the financial investment, but in the way in which you're really impacting people.
Okay, we are close to the end of our podcast review of the year, but Jenny Rogers, the coach's coach, was one of my guests in October. This was episode 351, and I very much enjoyed calling this podcast No Faffing About, because actually 50% of my podcast listeners are in America. It's been like that for years, and I just sort of had this idea in my mind that my podcast listeners in America have no idea what faffing actually means, but it sort of made me chuckle, so I kept it in. And you could say that sums up Jenny's approach. No faffing about.
I've been told, she doesn't faff about.
Yeah.
So, but I fortunately also get nice feedback about kindness. So perhaps it balances it out.
Well, there's no point in faffing about. I mean, that should be the title of this podcast, something about faffing about, I think. My American listeners might not get it, but we'll work around that one. What about, I mean, you mentioned, will I be, that sort of dilemma, will I be miserable if I take a job that pays a lot, but I'll hate? What everybody wants is the sort of lifestyle and career where it pays a lot and they love the job. Do you help people work on career progression as well?
Yes, I think that's a fascinating area. And I do a lot of work with people on career issues, yes. People who, I have to be careful what I say not to identify people, but people in very, very well-paid professional jobs who sometimes have got the job they think is going to make them happy. And then they discover, often only 6 or 7 months into it, that it isn't making them happy. So then they have to think, well, what is it about me that isn't fitting this? What other skills do I have? Can I leave if I do? What else could I do? So I was having a conversation yesterday with a very highly paid lawyer who is asking himself this question. He's been in this firm a long time. And it's really, I think, going to feel like a bereavement if he does actually leave. But probably he will.
Yeah.
But then the question is, well, what else could I or should I do? And what will the impact be on my family? What will the impact be on me? So again, it's a safe place to consider all of that. And I think what often happens is that we fantasize about all the kind of negative things that could follow. And usually they don't. So I think if there's a thing about being honest with yourself about your own strengths, your own weaknesses, what really brings you joy.
A very inspiring podcast, and 351 podcasts in. That was the number if you want to listen to the full Jenny Rogers interview. Now, Stefan from Sensate was a podcast guest in November, on November the 8th. And Sensate is an unbelievable biohackers tool. And in fact, if you go to tonywriter.com, you'll find a little discount in there as well. And we talked about calming your fight and flight response. So I think this is just so important. I know when mine has a sort of tendency to spike at points, and I've already mentioned that in this podcast. You know, and reducing tech is one of those things, and using something like Sensate is another one. Great little gadget, great little bit of biohacky tech. And here is Stefan Shimeliak on Zestology in November.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think it is part of the whole fear-based thinking that human beings are evolutionary evolved, by the way, to think. We are hardwired for anxiety as human beings. I think the world made a lot more sense to me when I understood that. And I think with everything in life, really, follow the money. Yeah. So what is the evolutionary advantage to this? Yeah. So why would human beings do well by being stressed and anxious? Which and the bottom line is, it's the ones that were stressed and anxious who survived. Yeah, they were the ones that were a bit paranoid, who hoarded food and didn't starve over the winter, who were a bit more careful when they went into that cave. And so they passed on their genes, right? So, the human blueprint is one of stress and anxiety. So we shouldn't, this wonderful sense of flight, fight, freeze, this perception of danger response, that we have has enabled us to become the dominant species on the planet. But around about 50 years ago, it started to work against us. Yeah. Because the nature, as we've evolved from living on the land, hunting, etc., to being information and data-based creatures, the perception of danger that hasn't kept pace with that. So although our danger perception sense is highly acute, it's not particularly clever. It's very powerful, but it's not clever. So it can't really tell the difference between psychological threat and actual physical threat. So just the sense of being overwhelmed, too many emails, too many phones, as you say, too much time, constantly chasing something or being chased by something. Our poor little primal brains perceive that as danger, and there's only really one response to that, which is to play around with stress hormone activity. And in the absence of an actual threat to respond to, that's very pro-inflammatory. So it's like having half a dozen espressos and then going to bed. It's not going to work. So sitting at your desk looking at emails and having adrenaline seething through your system, it's not going to work. So but we can't uninvent anything. That's the thing. Nothing has ever been uninvented.
No.
So we can't uninvent the mobile phone. We can't uninvent email. Fax has, I think, now finally disappeared, which is great. So there's one less thing that we're being chased by, but it's been obviously replaced by dozens of more. So WhatsApp and Telegram, and there's so many ways in which we're being chased. Yeah. And as I say, our brains don't care that it's WhatsApp. As far as they're concerned, it's a tiger. So we have to, the challenge for human beings in the 21st century going forward is, how do we live with technology, because it's not going away, and society isn't going to function if most of us go off grid, and going off grid isn't going to work for most people anyway. So you need a very particular mindset, I think, to do that successfully. So how do we go forward as a human race? How do we live with technology? How do we make it work for us? And how do we enable it to fulfill its promise? So, because this is the contradiction, isn't it? The more labor-saving devices that we make, we don't work any less, do we?
And that was episode 355. That brings to an end my Zestology review of the year. I'm still walking around West London. I hope you can sort of hear all right and the sound quality is okay. As I said, I recently switched to doing these podcasts walking about, and I hope in 2022 there will be plenty more travel and recording podcasts abroad. There's not been that much of that this year, but that's okay. It's just one of those things, isn't it? But I hope you have a great festive holiday season. I will be back on January the 1st with my first podcast of 2022, the now traditional interview with Dr. Stephen Simpson. We've already recorded it and I'm so excited to put it out, and some brilliant guests in January as well. In fact, a month or two ago, me and Alison, my podcast producer, we sat down and we've seriously refocused on getting some great guests, and it's been so good. We've just sort of landed all the podcast guests we wanted to interview at the start of 2022, including some new guests who've not been on before, so very excited about that. I've been very honoured to have my podcast partners this year, and especially this month, Inside Tracker. You must check out Inside Tracker. Go to insidetracker.com/Zestology for 25% off. Well worth it, and they've been brilliant podcast partners, and I very much hope I'll be continuing with them in 2022. And Bioptimizers, their magnesium breakthrough product, their P3OM product is just so good, and you can use the code Zestology10 on any of their range, whether you're in the UK at bioptimizers.co.uk or in the US at bioptimizers.com. Brilliant podcast partners, and I am definitely going to be working with them in 2022, so that's exciting. And doing some new fun stuff with them as well. One last thing, I hope to do some live events in 2022, and obviously, as I said a few moments ago, 50% of the audience for Zestology is based in the US, so this will be for the other 50%, and I have got a plan with the boys at Well Easy, the brilliant online store. I think you can use the code Zestology10 there as well for 10 quid off your first order. Have a listen to have a look at Well Easy, but also listen out for details of the live event in 2022. That's going to be a good one. All that remains for me to say is thank you for listening. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I'll see you on the 1st of January. It's the perfect way to dust off those cobwebs after a big New Year's Eve. See you on the 1st of January and have a good holiday season. Bye for now.